The thing had been found somewhere in the deep of the desert, hiding in a corner of a temple, uncovered only by a particularly unforeseen sandstorm. The temple, stony, great, and ancient, jutted out like an island amongst a sea of sand. The locals of the area, I was told, were a bunch of superstitious nomad folk, though the veracity of these claims are likely untrue. But, as the story goes, they entered, found nothing but empty pots and jars, and the mummy, wrapped in cloth and bound with rope, curled in a fetal position, almost crying. And a chain too, one that chained its leg to a handle of a large painted jar. The locals feared it at once, fleeing and calling for help to exorcise the devils of the uncovered temple. Somewhere along the way, the contents of the temple made its way to a black market auction across the world, and its contents soon caught the eye of my parents. My parents were rich, the type of rich people that want to seem cultured and purchase all sorts of bits and bobs without really understanding where they came from. They had always liked to travel, leaving a teenage me at home, alone, with the occasional check-in from a sister who, on most days, forgot I existed. My parents settled on the weeping mummy and a large jar, covered with strange symbols and pictures they claimed would increase the, as I recall, feng shui karma of the house. Like I said, they were the type of rich that only wanted to seem cultured. I took an instant dislike to the mummy. The first time I saw it, I wondered if what I was seeing was truly real. My parents had returned in the deep hours of the night, garage loudly opening, and dragging the jar and the mummy inside. "What is that?" I asked, confused as they dragged the mummy into a display room of sorts. My mother laughed. "A mummy from Egypt or something," she replied. "Isn't it cool?" She went on to tell the seller's probably fake story about an uncovered temple and superstitious locals. I noted the bonds on the hands and feet. Why is it all tied up like that? For a second, I saw it move, just slightly, rapping against the rope, and I stepped back. It's creepy. We arrived at the trophy room, and my parents propped it against a corner, out of place amongst Aztec artifacts I was sure was faked. "Doesn't it look good over there?" my father jostled. "A perfect fit." It did not fit. The weeping mummy collapsed face forward, making it look creepier than ever before, its wrapped stitches starting to tear apart. I remembered they had bought a jar. And the jar! My father beckoned me out, and they started to push the large jar into the hallway, and then to another, and then to the very centre of our living room. The jar, while not as disturbing as the mummy, still resulted in goosebumps on my skin. There was just something off-putting about it, something I just couldn't put my finger on. So we stood there in silence for a while, admiring the large, empty jar. "Welp," my father started, breaking the silence. "Me and your ma have to go now." That did not concern me. They were always away. "Off to some temple of the three-winged something." "Butterfly dear," she finished. "This place seems so cultured. It'd really help us to look well-read if you buy some of the books." And, as suddenly as they had come, they were off again, leaving me alone in the dead of night with an empty clay jar in the living room and a preserved dead body in the trophy room. I wasn't scared or anything, though. Not then. My parents had bought all sorts of eerie oddities before. A voodoo doll from Haiti, a severed head from somewhere, and even taxidermied animals that, despite how much I scoured the internet, did not exist. So I walked back to bed and slept. I awoke an hour later to the sound of something on the wall. No, not exactly. As I listened, confused, I realised it was beyond the walls of my bedroom and past it. Something scratching from the other side. "Hello?" I called out, unsure. Nobody was supposed to be in here, and my cat lay in her bed, mere inches from mine. The scratches stopped, and then continued. I sat up, confused. My mind mapped out the house. The trophy room was on the other side of my room. Was it? No. It couldn't be. Perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me. Then it all went quiet, and suddenly the noise was replaced by another sound, a soft whine that almost sounded like wailing. No, weeping. It was hard to place it, but it was clear enough. I was sure it was weeping. I laid back down, terrified, and gingerly wrapped my blankets around me. The noise continued, loud enough to keep me just alert enough to not fall asleep. But eventually, sleep took me, despite my concerns. I had forgotten the events of the night, of the cries I'd heard when I woke the next day. My sister, Brenda, was half singing a tune, clanging something together in the kitchen, and I walked out into the living room and met her. "Ah, Canopy, you're awake!" she joyously cheered. "Sorry I didn't come yesterday, or the day before." "Or the entire last week," I pointed out. "Aren't you supposed to check up on me every day?" "Our little secret," she promised, handing me unappetizing-looking pancakes. I nodded in agreement. I didn't need someone watching over me. I was 17, for God's sakes. "I noticed the, She gestured to the clay jar in the centre of the living room. "New decor?" I explained to her that our parents had come by in the dead of night to drop things off. "Have you seen the mummy yet?" I asked, gesturing towards the trophy room. "The what?" I brought her over to the trophy room, revealing the newly placed. The mummy was gone. I stepped back, gasping in shock. It was not in the corner, curled up. No. Now it was. "It's very like our parents," Brenda murmured, staring across the room. To the left side, the side I realised bordered my room. The mummy was there, curled up, facing the wall with an almost paw-like hand reaching up at it. "Gives me the creeps." "That wasn't there last night," I murmured. I stepped closer, taking a more definitive look. There were marks on the wall, small little punctures that reminded me of needles. "Well, I'm gonna go now," Brenda commented, retreating back into the living room, then out the door. "Got friends to meet. A little secret." She was out before I could say any more, and that was when the noise started up again, a piercing, soft wailing, same as the night before, now jostling my mind into fresh, clear memory. I found the key to the trophy room, walked over, saw the mummy slumped over, now laid on the floor, still tied together, an inch from where it was before. And yet, as I neared the room, the weeping sound softened and vanished. I slammed the door shut and locked the door. "Okay," I breathed. "I can deal with this." I resorted to playing video games. I sat down on the sofa, turned on the TV, connected my controller and started to... The wailing noise started again, now clear as day, a long, monotonous cry that sent my flesh cold. And then the jar started to move. No, not move, but vibrate softly. And from the jar I heard the noise, a soft weeping sound that sounded all too human. I nervously peered into the jar. There was something inside. "What the hell?" But the words didn't come out exactly. There was a pool of black water inside the jar, tossing and turning, rippling. It seemed sticky somehow, bursting forth and matting the sides. And then the noise grew louder, and something inhuman jutted out of it, a sharp rocky point, and then something spherical. "Oh God!" I yelled and stumbled back. It was a head with a spear through it. That was what it was. I hesitated and looked back at the jar again. No, it wasn't a spear. The head of the blackened thing was deformed somehow, and as it rose out, I saw eyes, closed yet far too wide to be human, covered in the black oil, and ears pointed and moving in the black. The weeping crescendoed as the thing rose, still soft, yet piercing. And then the eyes opened, revealing nothing but teeth. Sharp, stained, dagger-like teeth that opened and closed like the jaws of a beast. And where its mouth was supposed to be was only a hole, perfectly circular in shape, and sucking in the black oil and nothingness. The cries of weeping emanated from it, now as loud as the crickets of the evening sun. I was entranced, caught by its spell. I was terrified, and yet I could not move. I could only stare into the mass of black and scratching on the door of the trophy room. And all of a sudden, I woke from the trance, just as the thing inside the jar reached out a hand covered in teeth. I leapt back as it swiped at me, and then panicked as the creature lifted itself out of the jar, black, paint-like goo dripping from it, and the mural on the jar started to reveal itself, awakened by the oil. I didn't stick around long enough to pay attention, and I ran as the monstrous, deformed thing of a child fell out, now crawling, dragging itself towards me. It was fast too, the lower half of the child being the body of a snake, with 1,000 tiny legs helping it along. Its mouth opened, and the cries of a baby emerged from it, as if it were a recording, an imitation, a false mimicry. I backed away, and it got closer and closer, and I felt my head thud against a door. I turned the handle, finding it locked. I had backed myself up against the trophy room. Not thinking, I unlocked it and fell in, screaming as I fell atop the mummy. Disgusted, terrified and confused, I screamed as I was panicked, crawling off the corpse onto a corner. The thing, still in the hallway, opened its mouth, and the cries of a false infant leaped out. I could only back away so far. But the creature did not enter. The dead body of the mummy, still bound by rope, lay at the entrance, a cruel barrier between me and the thing. The not baby, the unchild, rasped and growled with the cries of 1,000 false children, but it did not pass. I was shook by shock when the bound corpse suddenly raised a hand, a claw bursting forth from its wrappings. It reached for the wall and whittled something into it. Something I could not see. And then the mummy, started to struggle against its bonds, and as it did, the thing that was not a child drew back, the rope binding snapped, and the mummy was freed. It started to crawl forward, and with every inch it moved, the baby crawled back, eyes gnashing teeth and snapping at the corpse. But the undead thing persisted, moving against it, a freed claw striking against it, drawing it back. I was just glad I wasn't its target anymore. But still, I was trapped behind two unnatural beasts. Suddenly, the unchild screamed as the clawed, bony hand caught it, and I followed the two as the mummified corpse of something that, by the look of a furry paw, was inhuman, dragged it into the living room. And then it was over. The mummy, holding the unchild, stepped into the jar, disappearing from view. There was a cry then, and then nothing. Gingerly, I walked up and peered into the jar. There was nothing there now. Just a clay beige bottom. No serpentine child. No eerie mummy that did more good than harm. Nothing. Not even the black goo that had been there before. I studied the mural of the jar, touching it as I studied. It was warm. There was a story there, a family cursed by a deal with evil, some sort of a painter that painted a half-serpent child, and a child dying from sickness. The painter seemed to promise a cure. A lie. The child was cursed to roam the world ever hungry, looking for a next meal, and its father to forever hunt to stop the undead thing that would not die from feasting upon another. Together, buried in a temple lost to time, only being awakened after the unforeseen aftermath of a particularly unchecked sandstorm. A scratching sound from the trophy room drew my attention. Somehow, the fear had left me. The weeping mummy, still bound by rope, lay in the corner my parents had left it, a wrapped-up hand now pointing at the wall. Crude English marred the wall. I read it. She lies. Like I said, my parents used to bring home a lot of weird stuff. This was only the beginning.